What's going on, team? So I'm going to talk to you about a strategy that you can use in your fat loss efforts. Now, we are really big into systems and processes. Okay, strategy can almost be another word for diet. But just bear with me in this strategy and we'll kind of see if it might be a decent strategy that you can talk to your coach about or implement in your life. All right, so we decided that we want to lose fat. We know that we need to cut calories. So, all right, where do we start as far as where to cut those calories from? Should we cut them from protein, carbohydrates, or fat? Well, let's start with protein. So as we're in a caloric deficit, and the more aggressive that deficit gets, the higher our protein needs go. So we're probably gonna end up increasing our protein, if anything. So we're not gonna be borrowing a whole lot of calories from, or creating much of a deficit from cutting out proteins. If anything, that might go up. So now we're left with carbohydrates and fat. Let me just touch on proteins. We want to keep our nutrition strategy anti-inflammatory, so we're probably going to be eating more lean proteins as they're more anti-inflammatory than extremely fatty sources of protein. So by switching our protein calories up, we're probably going to be decreasing a little bit of our fats just by turning our protein sources from not lean protein sources to lean protein sources in an effort to get more protein. All right. So with that said, we're now left with carbohydrates and fat. Should we just decrease equally from the two? Well, that would actually be a pretty good strategy. Just kind of have a calorie pool. Our carb and fat needs kind of change on a day-to-day basis, depending on our activity and things of that nature. But what I would say in this strategy is to look at cutting those from some carbohydrates. Now hold on and just hear me out. Why would I say that? I'm looking at the psychology. The carbohydrate foods, or foods that are primary carbohydrates, are the one unique category of foods that we can eat more of and actually be eating less calories. So wait a minute, how does that work? Well, let's take an example of a carbohydrate that I can eat almost in mass abundance, but be taking in a lot less calories. So that would be our leaf vegetables, a lot of our fruits, pretty much almost any green leafy vegetable, or almost any vegetable period, is gonna be lower calories. So I could have a huge amount of food, notice I didn't say calories, but a huge amount of food from a subset of carbohydrates, feel satisfied, feel full, feel like, wow, that was a big meal, and actually be eating less calories. Where if I said, hey, I want to eat more fats, well, fats are a very, very condensed energy source, and there's not a lot of foods that are majority fat that you can eat in abundance and actually have less calories. You know, nuts, seeds, oils are all very high calorie. And we already mentioned that our fats are going to be coming down anyway because we're eating more lean protein. So if anything, we're probably going to need to add some anti-inflammatory fats in, like avocado oil, extra virgin olive oil, chia seeds, almonds, things of that nature. So we're kind of left with that carbohydrate group. And again, that's the one group where it's easy to cut calories from, but it's also easy to eat more of those foods. So another good thing about having that expansion mindset instead of a restricted or scarcity mindset is as we eat more of these bulk foods with less calories, we're also going to be eating more dietary fiber. Okay, so now inadvertently, just by changing that calories, by cutting carbohydrate calories and focusing more on carbohydrate foods, it's big differentiation there. We're now getting more dietary fiber in, which means that we're going to be a lot fuller during our nutrition strategy or during our caloric deficit. So it's a lot easier mentally to continue on this caloric deficit with the higher fiber and with the portion sizes actually increasing. Okay, so we can increase our portion sizes with a lot of the carbohydrates, particularly plants and plants. We're able to increase our portion sizes but decrease our caloric consumption. So very, very key. Another thing that happens when we do that is if we're eating, say, less of certain subsets of carbs because we're eating more of the plants over here, we're probably going to be decreasing our sugar intake, which can sometimes, for some people, wreak havoc on their hunger. I know that when I eat a lot of sugary processed foods, I tend to get really hungry really quick, probably from the rapid rise and fall in blood sugar levels. So you tend to avoid that, and if you're already in a calorie deficit, now again, it's helping again with hunger, all right? We look at inflammation. So if unfortunately, the carbohydrate calorie is the cheapest calorie for the government to produce, or to be produced, okay? It is the cheapest. That's why high fructose corn syrup and carbohydrates and sugar is in everything. You walk into any grocery store and it's just gonna be in mass abundance, all right? So it tends to be the cheapest calorie, and that's why it's so easily abundant. So when we say, hey, I'm gonna eat less calories from carbohydrates, we tend to by nature reduce our inflammation. Okay, now we're going to reduce our inflammation because we're losing fat and we're eating less, which is awesome, but we tend to kind of 10x that effect by eating less of the processed carbohydrates, all right? So that's why that nutrition strategy might be something you give a week, give it a try for a week and say, all right, cool, I'm going to eat more carbohydrates that are, say, plant-based, and this is not a plant-based talk, but okay, more plant-based, so more anti-inflammatory carbs. And in exchange, you're gonna eat a little bit more protein if you're in a caloric deficit. So just by switching those carbs over from inflammatory to anti-inflammatory, or from processed carbs, nothing wrong necessarily with processed carbs, but again, it's a psychological. You're able to eat like this big of a cookie, or you can have a salad like this. Well, when you're in a caloric deficit, the salad like this with all the fruits and vegetables, then by eating that way for a week, you might make a relation where, wow, when I get this inflammation out of my body, I actually feel a lot better. And typically when you have two senses that are both encouraging you, you typically can start to form a habit. So the two senses would be, you actually see, okay, you're getting lighter because you're in a caloric deficit, but then you actually feel better from switching that inflammation around as well. I still definitely eat sugar, but when I tried this approach, I started to eat a lot less sugar because I correlated how my brain felt after huge influxes of, Pizookies and Toll House cookies and whatnot. So this strategy has worked very, very well with my situation. So that would be my hopes, is maybe you try it and see how it helps for your situation. But you always want to think from a psychological standpoint, expansion. Hey, what can I eat more of that would actually result in less calories? Instead of saying, well, I can't eat this, I can't eat that. That mindset in the nutrition world, or almost pretty much any world, that scarcity mindset or cutting down, or that restricted mindset never wins. Or it wins for short periods of time, but it doesn't win in the long period of time. All right, actually, if you have questions on this or any clarification, let me know. Hopefully this is something that you can implement in maybe the next week. And again, document how you feel by eating more of the subset of carbs over here and less over here, to see how you feel. And you're never gonna leave those foods out that you love, but you may find that you just crave them a little bit less over time, and it makes your caloric deficit easier. All right, rock and roll. You guys have a great day.